Thank you for coming, everyone. I'm Scott Radcliffe. I'm the managing director of the MSBA program at Emory University's Gazweta Business School. I'm relatively new to academia. I've been there about 5 years. I spent my career, 25 years or so, in industry doing data science and analytics things. And I'm convinced that what we do is a little bit unique, and it's part of our differentiating value proposition for both students as well as the clients we work with. I think our partnership model, is more focused on mutual value and long-term relationships as opposed to transactional. In other words, here's a set of students, we can do a project, and you get this at the end. Another thing that I think is a bit unique is the fact that both myself and Dr. Chalapa, who founded the program, we spend a lot of time helping the client shape the project before we decide that, hey, we should work together. Also, which you'll learn more about in a moment, Dr. Chalapa and I and one other professor, we meet with every team every week in order to guide them through the process of executing this project effectively. Last but not least, rather than just a deck, we have a set of deliverables that we promise the client, which you'll hear more about in a moment. Again, we have a collaborative partnership model. One of the issues with working with a university, oftentimes the university wants to claim IP ownership. We just get rid of all that right on the front end. You'll hear about the agreements we do, but essentially there's lots of benefits to the partner. We refer to our sponsors as clients because, again, we're trying to make this like a consulting engagement, minimizing any conflicts of interest. Right? At the end of the day, aside from our pedagogical objectives, we want this to be for the client in a similar fashion to that of a consulting firm. So just real quickly, every person involved on our side, we sign an NDA, students, faculty, staff. We almost always use the client's NDA because if we didn't, we'd never get a project done. That's a joke, but yeah. So, and then we have a standard sponsorship agreement, which, just basically it's very simple. It lines out what you get, how you interact with us, and you're basically assenting to the fact that ultimately we can use your brand and we can say things about you and our relationship. As I mentioned, Dr. Chalapa and I do 2 to 3 consultations with every potential sponsor where we spend a lot of time helping the client shape the business problem, right? Not down to a specificity that it can be executed, but generally, is it a human resources problem? Is it a problem, which you'll hear about in a minute, with one client as an online consumer company, and they wanted to figure out how do we take a particular kind of offering and reduce fraudulent transactions, right? So it's kind of at that very high level. Next, we talk about feasibility. In other words, can we deliver something in 16 weeks? Something meaningful that addresses that business problem. Now, not a few projects ultimately end up in some kind of research relationship with a professor and or PhD student where they take the problem and they work on it further, right? If they want to further develop it past what we can do in 16 weeks. We also assess the analytical requirements because of the learning opportunities we're trying to present to our students. The project should have some type of, we say AI these days, but data science, machine learning, advanced analytics type of application. We agree generally on the project scope. We align expectations around how much time we think it will require, the fact that we require our students to meet with the client every week, to ask questions, to give them a project update. Again, just like a consulting engagement would be like. Part of our value proposition and our brand, we always refer to the Venn diagram there of business, data, and technology. We believe we're just as technical as, say, a program at Georgia Tech, but at the same time, we teach our students how to engage as an analytics consultant. And when I say consultant, that's not only working for an external consulting firm, but as you AI professionals know, you're always an internal staff consultant, right? If you're working directly for the firm. Some selected examples. The first one there was a machine. This was actually kind of an R&D project with one of the top 3 online real estate service companies, like Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin. Essentially, I learned something in the course of that project that I was really surprised. At the time, 10% of the rental listings were fraudulent, where scammers were trying to get people to pay the security fee and so forth, and then just disappear. So they had a somewhat of a rule-based and kind of very manual process, and obviously they couldn't look at every listing because there are tens of thousands at any given time. So we took not only the standard set of rules they had, but every single piece of information we had about listers, right? The companies or individuals listing properties, and developed a predictive model to prioritize listings for review. A really neat project. We had, of course, the inside track with Emory Healthcare. We had one really cool project. It was a combination of a natural language processing project combined with a predictive project, where we looked at provider notes, that is doctors and nurses, leading up to a surgery, and essentially predict the probability of a post-surgical infection and a dimension as to what the risk factor might be. So obviously in that case, they would use that information to potentially intervene or pay attention to something specifically. So I won't dive into all of these. The last one, using AI to identify best corrective actions from maintenance logs. We've actually done that 2 times, once for an airline and once for a company that is the world's largest purveyor of ATM machines, right? Because they've got a large field force that goes out and fixes ATMs when they malfunction. And of course, it's a really important thing to do to minimize the downtime, right? And so if we could build a predictive model and do some proactive maintenance when necessary, when the model says there's a high risk of a failure, then that's better for the end customer as well as the engineering department of the hardware company. As I mentioned, a big emphasis we have in our program, and not only for the benefit of the client, but for the benefit of the students, is that we come right out of the gate treating this like a consulting engagement. Okay, I serve as, let's call it, the managing partner, and you'll hear in a moment, I work with teams in the process of the engagement, managing the engagement, communicating with the client, communicating with each other as a team. And then our professors are specifically assigned to working with this program, right? We don't just kind of dole out the projects to a variety of professors. One of the things we've learned is that by having these couple of professors focused on this program, they're also professors who've done a lot of external consulting. So they understand that it's not just about the bits and bytes, so to speak. And so, yeah, we focus a lot on collaboration, communication, and commitment to the project, because we promise deliverables, not just a deck. I just covered this, weekly technical meetings with all 13 teams this year. We have 11 different clients, 2 of our bigger clients, for example, the Home Depot. We have 2 different projects with them. We have 2 different projects with NCR. One of our students on the NCR team is right here today. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you about that experience. Weekly technical meetings with each team with these 2 professors. Weekly project meetings with myself, right? We look at the project plan. Oh, where are you on the data exploration? Oh, you're way behind. Why is that? Oh, well, we can't get the right information we need from the people in IT where the data was sourced from. And then we talk about, okay, how do you deal with that? How do you get that information? Because you're now behind. We have deliverables throughout the project, right? Again, like a consulting engagement, we start out with the team charter. How are we going to work together, and what are we going to accomplish together? What's our commitment to one another? Within the first 2 weeks of the project, they're required to have a project kickoff meeting with the client. For those clients who are local, we like for that to happen in person, which it often does. And for those obviously out of town, that's usually on a Zoom meeting. The third deliverable, which happens within 3 weeks after the project kickoff, is a detailed problem definition. In other words, they've broken down the problem, and we've taught them how to do this, right? That's the benefit of being in the business school. We've taught them how to break down that business problem to a low enough level of detail such that we understand the business processes involved. We understand the business metrics that we might impact through this project. And then, of course, we have a project plan. Right before the project starts off, we have a professional project manager from a consulting firm basically do a mini course, a 1-day mini course on how to use Microsoft Project and what are the basics of using that tool and how do you interact with the team on using that tool. Then halfway through the project, the students are required to have another formal meeting with the client to update them in a holistic way on the progress of the project. Then there is because this is a course, and we make it a course because we find that students spend individually 10 to 12 hours a week on this project. And with teams of 4 to 5, that means the client is essentially getting 1 FTE. So the professors review a deck that is more academic in nature. It goes into more detail, especially on the technical bits. Then there's a package of final client deliverables. I'll talk about what those are in a minute. One important point is that a meaningful part of the student's grade at an individual level is we observe their interactions with us, with their teammates, and with the client. Because again, what we're trying to teach them here, in addition to how to build a something model, is how to work together to deliver a product. The final deliverables package, technical code, any kind of data visualization assets that were creative, the final presentation, of course, and then a deliverables guide and documentation. That documentation including here was the layout of the source data. Here's all the transformation and data engineering we did to bring it to the point of doing some AI or data science procedure. And many times our clients want us to use their GitHub to manage all those deliverables, but that's up to them. These are some of our practicum partners. Most of those are quite recognizable brands. This year, we're doing our first international project with this company. Liberty is a global broadband company, and this is Liberty Latin America. That presented some unique challenges as neither the student team nor the client's first language was English. So that they had to get a little bit of special attention. But obviously, you know who these companies are. They span industries, span functions, right? So for example, with Newell, we're working on, you guys may know who Newell is. It's a very large consumer products company. They've got 20 plus brands. They've aggregated and through M&A collected all of these companies over the last 15 years. Now they're trying to integrate some of their back office functions, like HR, for example. So we're working with the folks in charge of digital transformation for HR in that project. Let's see, Cox Automotive, you guys may know who they are. They run through their automobile auctions. They're the largest wholesaler of used cars in the world. Most people don't know that. Well, with them, we're working on enhancements to the algorithm they use to value automobiles coming into the automobile auction. We're looking at new dimensions of data that have not been used previously. So in that case, we're not starting from scratch. We're looking at an existing asset and again, kind of doing an R&D-ish thing where we're trying to determine if we can provide a more accurate algorithm by adding in new data. So that's that. Any questions? Any questions at all? I'd love to have a conversation. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned several projects, like one was about fraud prediction, right, for employees, and another was about, I think, predictive maintenance about SR. Right?
Yes.
What typical technologies are here? Like kind of
what are we using?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all of our projects, and this is another thing we have to obviously agree with the client ahead of time, all of our projects are done in the client's cloud on any one of the three majors, you know, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. It's been kind of interesting to me as an aside, out of our 13 projects this year, 9 of them are on Google Cloud platform. All kinds, right? Whether it's, there's always a few traditional regression-based things. It depends on the business problem, especially where their focus is more understanding kind of, let's call it causal factors. And some projects may involve test and learn scenarios. But I would say the top 2 are probably some type of natural language processing. Of course, these days, LLM is the hot thing. We're actually struggling to figure out what to do with that because those are really more, at the end of the day, engineering problems, right? But generally speaking, natural language problem and some problem where it's binary or multi-class classification are the most commonly used, right? Where we're trying to put out what's the probability of yes or no, fraud or not fraud, and those sorts of things. Obviously, machine learning algorithms of all kinds. We find, as probably many of you do, that one of the most common ones that we find sort of optimal is XGBoost. That's probably the most common algorithm used. Our students, almost all of the projects involve Python code, of course, SQL. And again, we use a variety of tools depending on the cloud vendor in question. Great question. Thank you. Anybody? Well, you have a question? What's that? Oh, okay. It's time for me to go. I'm already late. We got started late. Thank you. Contact me anytime. Find me on LinkedIn. Appreciate your time.